Welcome to today's episode of the Kinky List by Skoob, and I'm your host, Zara Black. Before we begin, I want you to think about something. When was the last time a piece of clothing made you feel powerful? Maybe it was a sharp suit, a pair of heels that changed your posture, or even just the perfect jeans. Now imagine that the cultural coding of those garments, whether they're supposed to be worn by men or women, carried an electric charge, a forbidden thrill, or a sense of profound relief. Today, we're exploring cross-dressing as an erotic and psychological phenomenon, and I need to be clear from the start. This isn't about fashion statements or theatrical costume. We're talking about something deeper, the deliberate, often private act of wearing clothing culturally reserved for another gender, specifically as a source of erotic pleasure, psychological release, or identity exploration. Here's what's fascinating. Most people have experienced heightened sexual response to inanimate objects. Think about it. Have you ever been turned on by someone's sudden appearance in lingerie, a leather jacket, cowboy boots, or a well-tailored suit? That response? That's the foundation we're building on. For some people, that response becomes more intense, more specific, and deeply woven into their erotic identity. Cross-dressing exists in a complex space between fetish, identity, and role play. Some do it privately as part of a masturbation ritual. Others incorporate it into partnered sex or BDSM scenes. And here's the crucial part. Cross-dressers can be gay, straight, or bisexual. Their gender expression through clothing doesn't automatically tell you anything about who they're attracted to. That's one of the biggest misconceptions we need to dismantle right away. Let's get clinical for a moment, because precision matters here. Dr. Roger E. Pio, whose research we'll reference throughout this episode, emphasizes that understanding cross-dressing requires distinguishing between four separate dimensions: gender identity, your internal sense of being a man or woman; gender role, the behaviors that define you to society; sex, your physical biological state; and sexual partner choice, who you're attracted to. And here's the revolutionary part. Any combination of these four categories is possible. They don't have to line up the way conventional thinking assumes they should. Cross-dressing, in the clinical sense, is primarily found in males. It's estimated that anywhere from 0.1 to 1% of the male population engages in this behavior to some degree. And here's what's remarkable. There are no observable physical or hormonal irregularities that account for it. The average male cross-dresser is heterosexual, presents a masculine gender role in everyday life, and has a mostly or exclusively masculine gender identity. But when cross-dressed, he might say he feels female. Notice the complexity there. He's not saying he is female or wants to become female. He's describing a feeling, a temporary state, a different mode of being. In the beginning, cross-dressing often carries a strongly erotic component. But over time, something interesting happens. The erotic feelings may diminish, and cross-dressing becomes something else entirely, a way to temporarily escape from masculine role expectations. The psychology becomes, if I am dressed as a woman, then I no longer have my masculine responsibilities. Now, what about women who cross-dress erotically? Here's where it gets really interesting. Dr. Peo estimates that women who fit the clinical definition of cross-dressing, meaning it's a gender statement with erotic overtones, not just a fashion choice, are vanishingly rare, perhaps 1/10,000% of the female population. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen, and when it does, the motivations often look quite different from male patterns. Let's talk about what actually draws men to cross-dressing. One interviewee, who goes by Gypsy, put it beautifully. Cross-dressers want to pamper themselves, take a bubble bath and not be called sissy, or to put makeup on and look soft and feminine. It allows them to be the passive person. In my age group, men are supposed to be the strong ones and not allowed this side of themselves. When they're dressed as females, they can be submissive and soft and teasing. Read that again mentally. This is about permission. Permission to be soft. Permission to be pampered. Permission to occupy a space that mainstream masculinity actively denies them. Many heterosexual male-to-female cross-dressers prefer heterosexual encounters even while dressed. Some will role-play as lesbians with female partners. But here's where it gets more fluid. Some describe themselves as trisexual, meaning they have the ability to pretend they are heterosexual women engaged in sexual acts with heterosexual men. It's not that their orientation has changed. It's that the role play allows them to imagine themselves into scenarios that wouldn't otherwise be available to them. The clothing itself often matters deeply. Cross-dressers who engage in BDSM or kink tend to favor flamboyant or fetishistic clothing more than sexually conservative cross-dressers. One interviewee, Deirdre, explained, "I think my choice of style and attitude in cross-dressing probably relates to my interest in dominance and submission. I like leather and PVC and denim and fetish styles." Many cross-dressers dress according to their own image of the exquisitely sexy woman. The cross-dresser feels more sexually exciting and may have better access to submissive feelings when emulating these role models. They're not trying to disappear into ordinary womanhood. They're accessing a heightened, eroticized version of femininity. Now let's talk about something rarely discussed in popular literature: women who engage in erotic cross-dressing. Their experiences challenge many stereotypes. Women who cross-dress often describe it as a way to suspend the expectations placed on them in everyday life. Wearing clothing culturally coded as masculine allows them to step into a role that is freer, more assertive, or deliberately playful. Some prefer the structured feel of tailored jackets, boots, or traditionally masculine fabrics because these garments help them access a version of themselves not bound by conventional femininity. Here's a quote from an interviewee we'll call Rhea. "I'm not trying to escape being a woman, but when I put on a button-down shirt and men's jeans, I feel like I can take up more space. I can be bold, teasing, confident in a way I don't always let myself be. The fantasy is less about being a man and more about suspending the script of how women are supposed to act." Notice the difference in emphasis. While male cross-dressing narratives often center on submission, softness, and escape from responsibility, women's narratives emphasize control, agency, and role fluidity. Some describe the thrill of adopting a more dominant or androgynous presentation. Others note that cross-dressing softens the pressure to appear conventionally attractive or sexually available. Their sexual partner preferences typically remain unchanged while cross-dressing. Heterosexual women who don traditionally masculine attire usually continue to prefer male partners, though their role play may shift. Some adopt a more assertive persona. Others describe the pleasurable ambiguity of being seen as neither strictly masculine nor feminine. Most women who cross-dress erotically report no gender dysphoria. They're not attempting to adopt a male identity, but rather experimenting with presentation, power, and self-definition. Cross-dressing becomes a controlled space to challenge the boundaries of femininity without rejecting it. And here's the sociological reality. While research on male cross-dressing is extensive, women who engage in parallel practices often do so privately and without seeking clinical attention. They remain largely invisible in the literature. Let's venture into the fantasy landscape because this reveals so much about the psychological dynamics at play. In fantasy literature, the cross-dresser is most often found in the submissive role. Being a maid or in service to a dominant woman are common themes. These fantasies frequently involve torrid emotional drama. The cross-dresser must submit to a woman's authority, or he'll lose her affections, his job, or his social position. Dr. Pio suggests that coercion fantasies may reflect many cross-dressers' uneasiness about their erotic impulse to wear women's clothing. By being forced into feminine attire, they no longer bear responsibility for their desire and don't need to feel ashamed or guilty. As he puts it, if someone makes them cross-dress, then it is not their fault, and so they don't feel guilty. But here's the thing. Not all cross-dressers experience humiliation or enjoy coercion scenarios. Most simply wish to be perceived and accepted as women while dressed. For them, incorporating dominance and submission is often just another avenue for sensual exploration, not a way to manage shame. That said, humiliation scenarios are popular enough that there's a cadre of professional dominants who specialize in it. Here's an actual advertisement. For those who dare to apply, beware, as your humiliation will reach new heights as you're encased in nylon, tightly corseted, taught to walk in spiked heels, and then exquisitely powdered, shadowed, lined, and painted to whorish proportions. Some cross-dressers are erotically embarrassed by every detail of the outfit they're forced to wear. They enjoy being verbally teased about what a sissy they've become, and are aroused when the dominant makes them display their garters or walk across the room like a girl. They may be ordered to confess that they're no longer recognizable as men. They may prefer particularly bizarre or embarrassing outfits to heighten the experience. One dominant, Morgan Lewis, described it this way. For me, the man's humiliation is a triumph. It's like I've conquered something. If a man is humiliated by cross-dressing, that makes him more submissive. Then there are fantasies of being cross-dressed as a naughty or wanton woman. For the male to female cross-dresser who wants to be a shameless hussy, cross-dressing becomes a license to express lust without emotional penalty. In his ordinary masculine role, he might behave with scrupulous sexual tact, but in the feminine role, he may not feel constrained to control his libido, because the dominant has forced him to display his deepest sexual passions. Research suggests most cross-dressers aren't interested in high-intensity activity like heavy pain. Instead, they prefer less physically arduous activities with heavy emphasis on psychological games and role play. Lengthy scenarios during which they're dressed, powdered, wigged, made up, and erotically coerced into acting like a female. Head trips are prevalent. Many fantasize about being displayed before other dominants. Some enjoy combining gender play with age play, wishing to be a misbehaving daughter or naughty niece. Some are infantilists and wish to be cross-dressed in baby clothing. Sometimes fantasies link with other forms of sexual behavior, such as water sports or bondage, wherein the male is forced to wear restrictive clothing, corsets, helmets, arm binders, and held in a manner that prevents motion or removal of the clothing. Let's talk about what it's actually like to live with these desires, because this is where theory meets reality. Dr. Peo is emphatic about something. The erotic sensual component of cross-dressing is nearly always present regardless of protestations to the contrary. He suggests that disclaimers about the erotic component may stem from embarrassment about mentioning masturbation, or perhaps an attempt to make cross-dressing more socially acceptable by minimizing its sexual nature. But here's what's crucial. The urge to cross-dress often becomes most acute during periods of high stress. As Deirdre explained, part of the urge to cross-dress is a release of stress. I've noticed over the years that I tend to do it and feel more driven to do it when I'm stressed, when I'm not in a relationship, or when the relationship I'm in is a disaster. For some cross-dressers, there's a thrill in seeing how well they can pass in the other gender role. Dr. Peo notes that the high they get from this would certainly be diminished if there were no penalty for discovery. He's not even sure they really want general acceptance, because being a man has economic and social advantages to which they can escape after their sojourn into the world of the feminine. One professional dominant, M. Susie Bell, made this observation. I let the client know that a few hours dressed as a woman does not give him the life experience of being a woman. You need to be willing to be vulnerable, and you need to be willing to be a second-class citizen. A lot of men are not willing to do that. That's a powerful statement about the difference between temporary role play and lived reality. Many cross-dressers who cannot accept their inclinations, or who have censorious partners, go through phases of purging when they destroy their alternate wardrobes. As Christina described, there have been periods of purging when I deny my interest, but basically, I've been doing it all my life. The urge to cross-dress can become compulsive, particularly when the cross-dresser cannot find meaningful outlets like support groups or compassionate partners. When the need is repressed, it usually escalates. Compulsive cross-dressing can threaten the security of marriages and long-term relationships. Dr. Peo emphasizes that the most difficult psychological challenge the cross-dresser faces is acceptance of these desires. Without this, he faces guilt and anxiety that can spill over into the balance of his life. Through acceptance, he can learn to control his urges and enjoy the cross-dressed state. Coupled with this acceptance is the need to be sensitive to partners. Since most cross-dressers are married, this is a common problem. If cross-dressing completely invades the relationship, it will most likely destroy it. A majority of cross-dressers are probably solitary practitioners who conceal their interests from even their spouses for fear of rejection and disapproval. But repressing these needs usually only contributes to the dilemma. The obsessive nature of cross-dressing can be very disruptive. Generally, those who come to clinical settings do so because of the problems that cross-dressing causes in their life, not because of the cross-dressing itself. Many cross-dressers never feel the need to see a clinician, or have gone once and found that the average clinician is unable to help. One of the most common misunderstandings about transgenderism is that the difference between a transvestite and a transsexual is one of degree, that erotic passion for cross-dressing is a diluted form of transsexualism. This is fundamentally wrong. While complete feminization is a not uncommon fantasy among transvestites, few pursue sex change. As Cheryl Haggerty explained, a fantasy would be to live a life as a she-male, if not full-time, at least a good 6 months or a year, rather than just an afternoon. Living as a woman, keeping my genitals intact, thank you. Deirdre was equally clear. I enjoy cross-dressing. It's not something I feel I need to do all the time. I have no desire to change sex. The transvestite is also apt to have periods, sometimes extended, when he can live comfortably and successfully in his male persona. While the most common fantasy is to pass, to fool others into believing he's a woman, the majority of male-to-female cross-dressers lead prosperous, conventional lives as husbands, fathers, and community leaders. Transgendered people, on the other hand, cross-dress because they actually feel themselves to be of a gender other than what their genitals might suggest. Those who live full-time in their chosen gender are called transsexual. They may seek hormone therapy or surgery so their bodies match their spirits. Others may find their true selves somewhere between the genders and employ various strategies in dress and behavior to express themselves. While both the transvestite and the transsexual may wear feminine clothing and affect feminine behavior, their motives differ radically. Clothing and corollary feminine touches are intrinsic to a transvestite's pleasure. The cross-dressing alone brings intense gratification. Cross-dressers may even express a different, more sexual personality when cross-dressed. For the transsexual, clothing is simply part of living authentically in their true gender. It's not about eroticism or temporary escape. It's about alignment between internal identity and external presentation. Let's expand our perspective, because not everyone who wears clothing associated with another gender is a clinical cross-dresser. Theatrical productions use cross-dressing for comedic or sinister effects. Think Some Like It Hot or Psycho. There are female impersonators for whom cross-dressing is an integral part of their professional act. Sometimes cross-dressing is used as a disguise to commit crimes or hide from the law. And there are gay males who use drag as a way to attract sexual partners or express creative identity. None of these examples fit the clinical definition of erotic cross-dressing we've been discussing. Context and motivation are everything. What culture considers a fetish is also largely contextual. Being turned on by large breasts is so commonplace in the United States that nobody thinks of it as a fetish, but an attraction to tiny, delicate feet, which would be unremarkable in China, would probably be considered kinky here. Common fetishes include clothing items like shoes, lingerie, and diapers, materials like leather, latex, and silk, body fluids, and body parts like hair, feet, and buttocks. Most people who experience fetishistic attraction don't require these elements to achieve sexual satisfaction. They're the icing on the cake, something that boosts sexual response but doesn't substitute for it. We occasionally encounter someone so centered on their fetish that they can't achieve satisfaction without it. But this is rare. Some researchers suspect that if such individuals lived in cultures where they could get their needs met easily and without shame, the fetish wouldn't grow into an object of guilt-fueled obsession, but would simply become part of a broader range of sexual response. So what have we really uncovered today? Cross-dressing isn't a single impulse or a fixed identity. It's a deeply personal experience shaped by desire, power, vulnerability, and self-expression. For some, it offers softness and emotional release. For others, confidence, glamour, or control. What matters most is this: when these desires are understood and accepted, they can exist without shame or disruption. Crucially, cross-dressing is not the same as sexual orientation or gender identity. It lives on its own spectrum, separate from who someone loves or who they are. At its core, it reveals how complex our relationship is with gender, clothing, and the roles we're taught to perform. But this is only the surface. There are deeper psychological layers, real-life stories, and cultural truths we haven't even touched yet. To explore the full story, download the Skoob app now and get access to the complete episode, exclusive insights, and deeper conversations you won't hear anywhere else. Thanks for listening. Until next time.